Hi guys, my name is Ben Guilford. I'm the owner of the Fire Brick Company, and in this video we're going to take you through the fourth part of how to build the dome for your pre-cut brick oven kit.
So now we've reached a point where we're ready to change over to using the fiberglass dome rather than the Trammel tool. As we said before, the Trammel tool gives us a really nice, accurate finish, but it's kind of hard to do when you get to the very top rows. They're quite steep and the bricks are wanting to slide in. So what we recommend you do is you take the Trammel tool out. In the written instructions for your particular kit, we'll tell you when we recommend that. For the D105, we recommend at row 8, so finish up row 8. And as you can see, she's a little dirty, but it's done the job for us. And so we actually have customers who call us and say that Trammel tool, just one of their favorite parts of the whole build. It really does make building the dome quite, I'm not going to call it easy, but it does a lot of that hard work for you. So it's really cool. We've actually got a couple of people who've like cleaned them up and like mounted it on the wall behind the oven. All right, but enough with that. It's time to set up our fiberglass dome form. So what you're going to need is a car jack. All right, you'll need your fiberglass dome, and you'll need the circular piece of ply that you'll find in your kit. The idea of this piece of ply is to spread the weight, or the force provided by the jack, I should say, over an area of the fiberglass dome, rather than having a point pushing against the dome, which might break it. All right, now the fun part with this is getting it to stay on your jack while you're trying to get it up into position. And a suggestion that we have is just attach it to your jack. So I've just got some blue tack, and so I'm just going to put a little blue tack on the top here. You could use double-sided tape, anything you like, something sticky, just to get this, just to stay on there for long enough for you to actually wind the jack up into position. So we've wound our jack up into place, just finger tight. I haven't like cranked it or gotten any tools and really, pushed it up really hard. It's just firmly against that existing ring of bricks that was already there. So I've just wound it up. I'm not trying to push these bricks off. I just want this to be sitting nice and firmly in place so I can lay on top of it. Now, laying on top of the dome is much faster than using the Trammel tool. In fact, I can finish all of this fairly quickly if I put my mind to it. So some tips to make your life easier. You'll want to mix up this mortar just a little bit softer than you have been, because moving it by hand, we don't have the Trammel tool to help us sort of wiggle it. So we want to be able to just push it into position and have the excess squeeze out nice and easily. You're going to actually, what I suggest you do, it's up to you, but I butter the brick and lay it. Rather than putting the mortar down where the brick's going to land, I put mortar on the brick that I'm laying and I put it into position. What you'll do, you're aiming for the center of this brick to be resting on the fiberglass. We don't want the top edge or the bottom edge, so I don't want it sitting like that, nor do I want it sitting like that. I want it sitting basically comfortably on the fiberglass. And what you can actually do is so you lay one brick and get that right, and then you can use that brick to help you get the next one right, because you can line up the inside corners and make sure they're sort of touching. And that gives you a really good indication that you're on track and you've got them nice and neat. I'm going to go for it. One other suggestion that I would make is, if you can, give yourself plenty of time to do this, maybe a whole afternoon for this section, and try and finish the whole lot so that you can let it set for the minimum time, and then you can pull the fiberglass dome out and get into the oven and clean out the excess mortar while it's still relatively soft, while it's not hard as granite. Okay, because if we let this stuff set for 7 days, it will be nearly as hard as the brick itself, and we'll have a really hard time getting it off. So if you can plan this part of the build so that you can just tackle this in one, good solid afternoon and do the whole lot, then you'll be grateful that you did. So I'm going to get into it. Easiest ways to fill in the backs of them. You'll notice I'm really going for it here. I'm just using my excess mortar and I'm just working it into the back of the joints to fill them, and also on the insides. I'm really trying to fill these joints as much as I can all the way to the front, so that later on when we pull the formwork out and I slide in there on my back, I don't have to do too much pointing. I can just clean up the joints and get out of there, because frankly it's not my favorite part of the process. All right, another tip is when you're starting another row, get a rag and just make sure you clean this surface, just so that you don't have anything to push a brick up that the brick would otherwise would sit on. So make sure you're working with a clean surface, but remember guys, you're never actually going to see this brickwork. So you can be as fussy as you like, but in the end, in order to see these bricks, you have to slide into the oven on your back. So don't panic if they don't feel perfectly aligned. But it is fun to do things to the very best of your ability. So again, take your time, and I actually really enjoy this part because it happens very quickly, particularly compared to using the Trammel tool. So hope you're enjoying the process. All right, we're nearly done with the dome. So we've got all of our brick rows done. So in the case of the D105, we've done 11 courses of brick. And now it's time to pour the keystone that's going to finish the dome. So you might have seen in other brick oven builds, you can go brick all the way to the very top. And look guys, there's actually a bunch of extra bricks in your kit. So if you're really keen and you want to go brick all the way to the very top, be my guest, get those bricks, cut them down to the exact shapes that they're going to need to be, and lay them on the formwork as we were doing before, okay? But I like to use the castable for the keystone for a few reasons. One is it's very easy. It's super simple, and we're actually going to use the leftover castable that we had from pouring the subfloor heat bank. We had 3/4 of a bag left over, and so we're actually going to use that to pour it, so we don't end up wasting material, which is good. The other thing I really love about it is this makes the perfect keystone because it fills the void completely. Okay, you pour it in and it literally fills that entire void, making the perfect shaped keystone for your oven. So that's why I like using it. Once it's set, this is just as good as the fire brick. Okay, you can build the entire oven using this material, and in fact that's what we do. If you look at our pre-cast oven range, we built it with this stuff. All right, so we're going to be pouring the keystone with this mix. Now when you mix it up, don't mix all of it, so leave a little bit in reserve just in case you make your mix a little wet, just so you've always got a little bit of dry to add into it to stiffen it up. So I've gone quite it's thick. It's not a soup, again, the more water we add, the weaker this becomes. So we want a nice thick mix, but it shouldn't be, you know, rigid. All right, well, we're going to go and pour it. So I laid all these bricks before, and I've actually come back and I've cleaned off the excess mortar that was on the inside face against the dome here. As part of that process of cleaning up those bricks, get a wet sponge and just get in there and really wet that last row of bricks so that when that wet castable goes in, it's going in against a damp surface which won't dehydrate the castable. So I've cleaned that up nicely so that when I pour this castable in, it's not mixing, I guess, with bits of random refractory mortar scattered around. So I've cleaned that up. First thing we're going to do is actually get some oil. So I've just got some oil on a rag here. You can use vegetable oil, just cooking oil, just something to wipe. We're just going to wipe the fiberglass dome with it, just so that the castable doesn't stick to it. All right, so it's like a release agent, so that when we drop the dome out, then it's not going to stick. So we're going to get a really smooth finish on our keystone because it's going to follow the exact curve of our fiberglass form. Just like concrete, if you've watched any of our videos on how to build your oven stand, castable is like a high temperature version of concrete, and it's quite stiff until you vibrate it. So we're going to use a trowel and we're going to rod the castable to get it to flow in. See, when we rod it, it behaves like a liquid. It sort of flows. But if you just leave it sit there or you try and push it around, it behaves more like a solid. So we're just going to basically just give it that little bit of vibration, which will get all the little bubbles out of it and gives a nice finish on the inside. I've got a little bit more left over, so I'm going to mix that up and just create the dome. So we just got a nice consistent dome finish so that when we put our ceramic fiber blanket over, we don't end up with a flat spot on the top, and it just makes it a little bit easier when it comes to putting our perlite render on. We won't have to build up a really thick section over this bit. But honestly, you could leave it like this. When you're done with the castable, you need to cover this surface with cling wrap, because unlike the refractory mortar mixture that we've used to build the dome, this doesn't want to dry out too quickly. This doesn't have the same properties as this stuff. And if it's a hot and windy day, you can get drying shrinkage cracking in this. So we're going to cover it up as soon as we got it all in. All right, we're almost at the end of the process of building our brick oven. So well done for getting this far. What we're going to do now is we're actually going to form up and brick up our vent arch. So first thing we're going to do is put our yellow strips back in, because we want to make sure we can get our formwork out again. And then we get our number 2 formwork and just pop that back in. We've got our formwork in. Now, one thing I want you guys to do a check, and just to make sure, like we did with this entry arch, we want to make sure that these 2 corners here are meeting. All right. If this formwork is below this corner, we're going to find that our vent arch bricks won't fit because they'll be pushed too close together. So I'm actually looking, this is a great example, I'm looking over on the right hand side, and this side is sitting down by about 2 mil. So I'm just going to get some packers. You could use just about anything, just something that's flat and it's the right thickness. So you could use another piece of plastic or a little piece of steel, or hey, if you've got actual plastic packers around, great, use those. And so I'm actually just going to raise this side just a little bit so that it matches this corner. So your vent arch bricks will be in a cardboard box, and this is just to protect them during transit. These ones are really right on display, so we actually box these up for you really carefully to try and get them to you in perfect condition. So we're going to dry lay these bricks, just like we did with the entry arch. I want to check, what are my gaps going to be? How much wiggle room do I have in these joints? Your very worst case scenario is that you'll end up just grinding one down. Usually I grind the number 5 brick down, which is the one that sits right in the middle for the D105. But what we actually very careful how we size these bricks, so they should fit just nicely. You also notice the bricks are numbered, so you want the number to be facing towards you. So we actually check these bricks really carefully, and we pick the side that's got the nicest edges so that you get a really good finish on the front of your oven. Okay, so you can see here we've got about a 10mm joint, and we've got 10 mortar joints that we're going to be doing. So we can put at most 1 millimeter of mortar at the base of each of these bricks. So really, ideally, I'm actually going to aim for brick on brick joints across the front. I'm going to be very careful about how I apply the mortar, and I'm going to deliberately taper it off to nothing at the bottom edge of the brick. When I'm applying the mortar to the brick, I'm going to trowel it on, and I'm going to make sure that there's none on that very bottom edge. Just like with the entry arch, you need to lay this whole row in one go. All right, so mix up a batch of the refractory mortar, and you want to lay the whole arch so that it all sets together. We don't want to lay half and then come back to it tomorrow. We've got to lay the whole lot now. We want the base of this brick to be sitting on the middle, in the middle. I don't want to sit on either end, because then I'll get sort of steps across my arch. So if you want to get a really neat arch, aim to have the brick resting on the center. So our number 5 brick, fits really nicely. We've got about 2mm joint on each side. So we're just going to plaster that up with mortar on both sides, and then we'll tap it in. Any little voids, like you can see here, I haven't got the mortar all the way into this joint. I'm just going to come back and work mortar into that joint. I'll do the same thing on both sides, and then when I'm done, I'll give it all a nice clean.